Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us is Jay Jacobs. He's the Head of Research and Strategy at GlobalX ETFs. We're going to take a look at three categories that are performing well in the COVID-19 economy and which ETFs you can use to take advantage of this. Jay, it's great to have you back with us as always, and it's been quite a market since we spoke, certainly last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is unprecedented to say the least. But what we're really seeing in the broader landscape is that COVID-19 has really accelerated a lot of trends that have already been underway for many years. We're seeing obviously people working from home, leveraging technology to be able to continue to do their jobs, within their home offices. People using digital entertainment to entertain themselves while in homes, and companies are really looking to new production processes that allows them to depend less on a globally integrated supply chain. So we've seen these trends happening. COVID is just this massive disruptive event that has really accelerated the adoption of some of these new technologies and themes across the world.
Yeah, that's a great point that you make. And let's take a look at our first category here. This is robotics and artificial intelligence. And certainly that's something that you've been talking about at GlobalX for a number of years at this point.
We've been talking about it for a while. We launched a robotics and artificial intelligence fund in 2016. As you know, of course, we've seen a lot more production processes being shifted to automated systems. We're seeing it penetrate healthcare with surgical robots, in the military with drones, in transportation with autonomous vehicles. So robotics is something that's happening across the world, across sectors. But we're seeing COVID-19 really provide this new, stimulant to that theme. Because if you look at the last 2 years, you have these companies that depend on countries around the world for their supply chain, and you had trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Trade tensions between the U.S. and our North American partners in NAFTA. You've had some trade tensions with Europe. And suddenly these companies that really depended on a globally integrated supply chain are suddenly questioning whether that supply chain can be depended on. Then introduced this year, where you have COVID-19 and huge portions of the global economy have been shut down to prevent the spread. And it just is another reason to relook at those globally integrated supply chains. So what we're seeing on the robotics and artificial intelligence side is people are starting to look at, can we bring these jobs back from Asia, back from South America or Mexico, bring them into the United States, but rely on robotics and artificial intelligence technology to really reduce the costs. So, we've looked at some estimates of kind of that cost differential. And what we've seen over the long term is labor costs continue to rise, but robotics costs tend to fall. So that gap is really widening between automation and human labor. And the wider that gap gets, the more attractive it is going to be for companies to bring that offshore process back to the United States or back to their home country, where they have more control over the supply chain and can offset a lot of the manufacturing costs through robotics.
All right, moving along to our next category here, cloud computing. What's attractive with that is that recurring revenue model, and it's a relatively high margin business. So certainly attractive at times like this one. Our jobs are so technology dependent.
Absolutely. I mean, think about how, virtually everyone that's trying to work from home is suddenly using video chat. They're logging into their, maybe their desktops that are still in the office through VPNs. They're using internet-based software to access most of the data that they had in the office, but now can access it at home. So these cloud computing technologies are the basic digital infrastructure that's allowing this whole work from home process to exist. So that is certainly accelerating with COVID-19. I think a lot of companies were already shifting more and more of their processes to the cloud, but now it is not just a nice to have, it's a must have for most companies to be fully kind of cloud enabled. And then, yes, as you said, on the business model side, it's a very attractive business model. It's a very scale dependent model. So if you are a software as a service provider, and say you develop software that helps manage HR software, you develop that software once, but you get revenue based off of how many people you sell that software to. The variable cost of that is next to nothing. The development cost is kind of a fixed cost. So the more people you can sell that HR software to, the more revenue you're bringing in, and most of that incremental revenue is just purely additive to your margin. So the bigger that these companies can scale, the higher their profit margins get. That's very attractive to investors who want to see, that growth lead to, really rapid increases in profitability. So we like cloud computing, not just because it's so well positioned in the current environment, but we think it's really going to set it on a path of incredible profitability in the future.
All right, and let's wrap up the final category here, e-commerce. And like you were saying before, this is something that is not new. It's just that it's in front of us now, and we really don't have any other option but to engage with it. Let's learn more about that.
Absolutely. I mean, e-commerce has been around for a while, but believe it or not, it's only about 10% of total retail sales that happen online. So even though I think most of us are pretty comfortable, ordering things online, it's still just 1 in 10 of the dollars that we're spending is going online. That leaves lots of opportunity for growth. Where has that growth not really happened yet? It's happening in health spending, in personal healthcare products. It's not happening in autos, so people very rarely buy cars online, and it's very rarely happening in groceries. But again, if we bring back in kind of the current landscape, first of all, you have people from the baby boomer generation or the silent generation who may have been kind of the laggards in adopting e-commerce. Suddenly they have to use e-commerce because that's really their only option to buy things. But secondly, I think people are thinking about using e-commerce to buy products that they never would have bought before. So how many people are taking delivery of groceries in this environment through online shopping? That's a huge segment of e-commerce that really hasn't taken off yet. And over the last month, it's completely changed the dynamic where people are ordering online, they're receiving their groceries, and if they've had a good experience, they're going to keep doing that even as the world returns to normal. So again, this is a very disruptive environment that is creating a changing habit for consumers, but really it's kind of along the path that we've been seeing develop for years.
Yeah, it's really funny what you say about the baby boomers. My parents discovered Instacart, and that's all the rage right now with them. So can certainly see about the shifting attitudes toward this. To wrap up here, Jay, looking on the other side of COVID-19, is this a process getting us back to our old normal? Will we have a new normal? What are your thoughts as we all think about coming back to New York City, traveling globally? Do we think we'll ever get back to the way it was before?
I think it'll be somewhere in the middle. Obviously, there's a lot of pent-up demand where people really want to go to restaurants. I really want to go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
People want to travel. People have missed out on a few, taking days off and traveling over the last month or so. I think that will come back. However, companies are kind of rethinking what work from home policies mean, and what a lot of these companies have now integrated this cloud software that we talked about that allows for work from home to be more easily done. Maybe companies have realized that they don't have to fly around the country or around the world for meetings, that they can rely on video software to do that much more cheaply and maybe just as effectively. So I think certainly everyone has had a crash course in this technology and knows how to use it and knows its strengths and weaknesses. And I think it will change the calculus of how often we're working in the office and how often we're traveling around the world.
All right, Jake, great to catch up with you as always. Thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill.
All right, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.